There's a lot to this job, and as you saw yesterday, I don't get all of it right. But I do know how to run the economy in good times and in bad. When the banks collapsed, I took immediate action to stop crisis becoming calamity and to stop a recession becoming a depression.
So the red line going down there quite significantly, Ben.
I mean, basically, it shows, although he's trying to, deal with his problems of yesterday and being, calling a Labour voter a bigot, it just doesn't seem to wash. And even his record on the economy, which he may feel is one of his strongest suits, again, didn't seem to resonate with our audience this evening.
OK. We'll move on to the second clip, which is that of Nick Clegg, the Lib Dem leader. And this is a response to a question about how the parties will deal with the budget deficit. Let's have a listen to it.
Regardless of the outcome of the general election next week, wouldn't it be a good thing to get the Chancellor and the Vice-Chancellors of all the parties together, with the Governor of the Bank of England, with the head of the Financial Services Authority, simply to sort of be open and be straight with you about how big this black hole is and roughly how long it's going to take to deal with it, so that we're all at least speaking from, the same script about how big this problem is?
So the yellow worm pretty active there.
I mean, as before, as in all of the previous debates, when Nick Clegg talks about the need for the parties to work together on key issues like the economy, generally people seem to like that idea. What we saw throughout all of this is a dislike of when they have a go at each other, and we'll see that again in a second. So the idea they might work together is positively received.
OK. Our third clip is of David Cameron, and this is where he's defending his party's policy to raise the ceiling for inheritance tax up to £1 million. Let's have a listen.
Inheritance tax should only be paid by the richest, by the millionaires. It shouldn't be paid by people who've worked hard and done the right thing in their lives. It's not our top priority. Our top priority is helping those on the £20,000 that are going to be hit by Gordon's other tax. But should we try and encourage people to work hard and save? I say, yes, we should.
Now, this is an important policy for the Conservatives, isn't it? And the Blue Line reacted well.
Yes, well, I mean, people, we know that one of the turning points for the Conservatives was when they pulled out their policy on inheritance tax, and then, of course, making work pay, and that throughout these debates were very positively received for David Cameron, and there's sort of a sense of aspiration there. So it's been a good debate for David Cameron tonight.
Well, our fourth clip is about the issue of immigration, and this is where we see David Cameron attacking the Lib Dems policy of what he calls an amnesty for illegal immigrants. Let's have a look.
OK.
People do need to know that the Liberal Democrats propose an amnesty for illegal immigrants. Now, that could mean that some 600,000 people who are here illegally would actually be allowed to stay here and be given full citizenship, access to welfare, access to council housing, and could also bring a relative each into our country. Now, I think that just doesn't make sense. That, I think, is a complete mistake that would make a bad situation we've had after 13 years of Labour even worse.
Now, how intriguing. The Blue Line just dipped dramatically there.
Yes, because David Cameron, in other parts of this debate, as in the previous two debates, scored some of the highest points of the night when he talks about immigration, the need to be tough on immigration, the need to reduce it. But conversely, and as before, people dislike it when they attack each other. So even on an area where he's very strong, immigration, when he attacks Nick Clegg on that, people get turned off.
Well, our final clip is of Gordon Brown, and we saw him dip quite badly earlier. Now, here we can see the reaction to him talking about the long-term unemployed and how to deal with them. Here we can hear it.
I want to create jobs for people in this country. And I know in my constituency, I know in Birmingham, in the West Midlands, people are worried about their jobs and worried about job security. And they're worried about whether their children and their teenage sons and daughters can get a job.
So more of a positive reaction there.
Yes, I mean, Gordon Brown, I'm afraid, as in the previous two debates, is probably doing less well than the other two. He seems to find it hard to cut through to people, but where he does best is, again, when he's talked about investment, the need to protect jobs and investing in young people.
Ben, thank you very much indeed, and thank you too to our audience. Hugh, the worm has achieved something of a life of its own during these debates, but of course this time next week we'll be getting the results of the vote that really matters. But for the time being, back to you.
Rita, thank you very much. Rita Chakrabarti there with our specially selected group of voters giving their reactions as it went through. There are two instant opinion polls, very interesting figures. Nick Robinson is here to talk to us about that, but a word with our economics editor Stephanie Flanders too about some of the substance of the debate. On the deficit, Stephanie, did we learn something new about their stance on that?
Well, I don't think we learned any details. You know, we've been saying they haven't been coming clean about the details of the spending cuts that are coming down the track. I guess I'd be surprised to be telling you, yes, they promised to cut lots of popular programmes and policies. But in response to that first question, Nick Clegg and David Cameron did their best to describe some of the cuts that they had outlined, things like cutting child tax credit. I think the person who really made the most of this was, again, Gordon Brown, who admitted there would be public spending cuts, something he wasn't admitting a year ago, but was still constantly harking back to the things that Labour would protect, schools, policing, other areas that he claimed the Conservatives and maybe the Liberal Democrats would cut.
And on a wider, more general approach to economic matters, again, could you distinguish a little more clearly tonight?
I think we have an interesting but real sense of the difference of worldview about the size and the proper role of the state with regard to the economy. In effect, David Cameron took on this argument about the economy front on. He said, in effect, there is such a thing as the economy, we want to support it, we just don't think it's the same as the state. He does think at bottom that the size of government spending is part of the problem. It's helped to produce this big hole in our public finances and it could stifle our recovery in the future. Whereas Gordon Brown was constantly, in almost every breath, saying government was part of the solution. I used my government tools to prevent a Great Depression. It will help us come out of the recovery, out of recession if you let us. I mean, Nick Clegg was, as ever, in a more pragmatic position between the two. But you know, no more details on the deficit, but a real sense of their different approaches when it comes to the economy.
Nick, we've had some reaction from our group of voters, but what do you have?
Two instant polls, one by YouGov, one by ComRes, both showing David Cameron winning very clearly in YouGov, rather tight with ComRes. Nick Clegg second, Gordon Brown a clear third. Always stress their polls, they're not telling us how people will vote, what they just think of who won the debate. It will allow David Cameron's supporters in the press, though, to declare him the clear winner.